Hello, and welcome to Umbral Dread. Before we begin, take a moment to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I always enjoy reading them. If you enjoy slow, unsettling stories that quietly draw you deeper into the shadows, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now, get comfortable. Let your body settle into stillness and allow the outside world to gently fade into silence. Tonight, something moves within the dark, waiting to be heard. So close your eyes, listen carefully, and let yourself drift into the depth of Umbral Dread. Story 1. Live as if you were living already for the second time, and as if you had acted the first time as erroneously as you are about to act now. That was the last thing my grandfather ever said to me before he closed his eyes for good. I have carried those words with me every single day since then, turning them over in my mind like a stone you keep finding in your pocket. Never quite sure what to do with it, but unable to throw it away either. My grandfather was a great man, at least the version of him that I knew growing up. Everything he did, every decision he made, every sacrifice he kept quiet about, it was all for the benefit of his children and his grandchildren. He had this deep, almost fierce need to see us succeed, and he believed that if we did, then that meant he had done his job right. So he made sure, no matter how hard things got, that every single one of us had a warm meal at the end of the day, clean clothes on our backs, a cozy place we could call home, and a good enough education so that we could eventually go out into the world and provide for our own families in return. That is why I say with my whole chest that he was my role model. The woman I am today, I owe that to him. I would go to him with almost anything, big or small, and I would sit there across from him and wait with the kind of patience that only love can teach you, just waiting for whatever piece of wisdom he was going to hand me next. He was my Santa Claus in that way, always showing up with something good, except his gifts were not wrapped in paper. They came wrapped in kindness, in quiet words, in the way he looked at you like you were the most important person in whatever room you were standing in. But my grandfather had another side, one that existed long before I was born, long before he became the gentle and thoughtful man I grew up loving. He used to talk about his younger self with this heavy, uncomfortable look on his face, like he was describing someone he had met once and never wanted to meet again. He said that back then he did not care about right or wrong. He just did whatever he wanted, whatever felt good or powerful or satisfying in the moment, and God help anyone who happened to get in his way. The only people who truly knew the full depth of what that meant were him and my grandmother. They carried that knowledge together for decades, locked away like something kept in a box that you only open when you absolutely have to. I was 14 years old when my grandfather called me to join him and my grandmother at the dinner table. He said he had a story he wanted to share. I remember walking in there feeling uneasy, because I had never seen either of them look that serious before. Their faces were still and heavy in a way I was not used to, and my stomach dropped a little when I sat down. But they both noticed how anxious I was right away, and they were quick to tell me that I was not in trouble, that this was not about anything I had done. They just needed to talk to me about something important. My grandfather looked at me and asked how old I was. I told him 14. He let out this low, almost sad laugh and said, "It felt like just yesterday we were walking through the woods together, and I could barely keep up with him. And now he was the one struggling to keep up with me." Then his face settled back into that serious expression, and he told me that time keeps moving whether you want it to or not, that he and my grandmother were getting old and that the work on their property was becoming too much for them to manage on their own. He said they were thinking about asking the neighbors for help, but that would cost money they did not really have. That was why they had called me to the table. They wanted to know if I could come and help with some of the work. But before any of that could happen, I needed to know about certain things in their village. Peculiar things. His words, not mine. The look on his face darkened even further at that point. He leaned in and told me to pay very close attention to every single word he was about to say, and that I needed to understand that this was not like one of the comic books I spent my days reading. This was real. This was serious. My grandmother let out a small sigh and muttered that whatever he told me, I was probably just going to think it was a story anyway. He snapped at her to be quiet and said that if I did not take this seriously, I could end up dead. That was the word he used. Dead. I remember sitting there thinking to myself that there was absolutely no way I was ever going to move to some tiny village where, as my grandfather always put it, the fox and the hare say goodnight to each other. There was nobody my age out there. I would lose my mind from boredom. But I kept that thought to myself because something about the way he was sitting, the way he was looking at me, made me understand that now was not the time for jokes. He told me that their family had never been a religious one, that he had never tried to push any kind of belief onto anyone, and that personally he did not believe in God as a creator, though he did believe that something had designed all of this, whatever that something was. My grandmother, he said, was more on the religious side. She believed that God would eventually send one of his angels to set things right in their village. He waved that off and then told me he was not going to drag things out. He said that in their village there were entities. That was the word he chose, entities. And these entities had rules that had to be followed without exception, without hesitation, and without question. The first rule was about a hound. Not an ordinary dog, but something wearing the face of an impossibly old woman, ancient and wrong and out of place in a way that your brain would immediately know was not right. He said that if I ever came across this creature, no matter what the weather was, no matter what time of day it was, no matter what was happening around me, I had to greet it by saying that it was a nice day. Then I had to offer it canned food and a bottle of alcohol and wait for it to finish. After it was done, I had to tell it that the meeting had been pleasant and that I looked forward to the next one. Only then could I walk away. And if the creature ever tried to speak to me, to actually communicate, I was to ignore it completely, pretend I heard nothing, and carry on as if nothing had happened at all. Failing to follow any part of that sequence meant that within a few days I would no longer be human. The second rule involved two separate things that were connected. He asked if I remembered the old well at the edge of the property, the one they used to send me to fetch water from when I was small, before they dug their own. I nodded. He said that if I ever encountered a very tall man with a blurred face, a face that looked like someone had smeared it before it had a chance to dry, that man would ask me to bring him water. The water had to come from the old well and nowhere else. He did not explain what would happen if I brought it from somewhere else, but the way he said it made me certain I never wanted to find out. He also said that before drawing from that well, I had to stand at its edge and say certain words 3 times. The words were that Larry could not get me because I was protected, loved, fed, and belonged to a family. After I delivered the water and the task was done, I had to return home, but I could not simply walk inside. I had to climb the front steps backwards 3 full times before it was safe to enter. He told me there was a book among my grandmother's things that listed the other entities and their rules, but he only wanted to cover the most important ones himself that evening. The third one he spoke about was different from the others. He said plainly that for this one there were no rules and no escape. He called it what it was without dressing it up. He said that once upon a time there had been a man in that village who had done things so terrible, so far beyond what ordinary cruelty looks like, that even describing them would make the devil uncomfortable. And because of what that man had been in life, what he became after death was worse, so much worse. He said this entity looked like a young man, handsome, the kind of handsome that makes you want to be near someone, the kind that pulls at something in your chest without you quite understanding why. You would feel drawn to him. You would want to talk to him, to tell him things, to share yourself with him. And after the conversation, you would walk away feeling incredible, like the whole world had opened up and anything was possible, and life was full of color and potential. But then the days would pass, and something would change inside you. Violent thoughts would start crawling into your mind, urges you would not be able to explain or understand. You would wake up in places you had no memory of going to. Time would begin to slip, and then you would notice something moving beneath your skin, shifting and pressing from the inside out, and your reflection would start showing you something that was no longer quite you. Eventually, the man would have taken everything. Your consciousness would fade, and all that would be left was him, wearing you like a new coat. But then my grandfather said something strange. He said I did not need to worry about that entity because it only went after those who were truly wicked. And then he was quiet for a moment before he said that was exactly why he was telling me all of this. Because there was no one more wicked than him. He told us then about who he used to be. He said that when he was young, he did terrible things to the people around him. He described how he had enjoyed causing suffering, how it had felt like something he could not put down, an addiction with no bottom. He had wanted people to fear him in a way that followed them into their sleep. And the person who suffered most because of him was a boy who lived across the road, a quiet boy who had done nothing to deserve any of it. My grandfather said he tormented that child every moment he could, and that what he did to him over the years broke something fundamental in that boy. And that boy eventually became a terror himself. Though somewhere underneath all of that damage there was still a small piece of him that was human, just enough for him to eventually find a girlfriend and try to build something like a normal life. And then my grandfather told me the part that I have never been able to shake. He said he had told that broken boy that if he showed the entity a photograph of his girlfriend, all the abuse would stop. The boy was desperate enough by then to do it. My grandfather had used his cruelty to pass a curse onto someone completely innocent just to protect himself, just to buy more time. He said he never found out what happened to the girl or the boy after that. Their families left the village and never came back. When he finished, my grandfather fell apart. He started crying, hitting his hands against his own head, saying over and over again that calling himself a monster was not even close to enough, that whatever horrible fate was coming for him was exactly what he deserved. And fate did come. Right after he took his last breath, right there at his bedside, my grandmother heard it. The sound of bones snapping, the sound of flesh tearing. My grandfather was turned inside out. I'm writing all of this down because I am 32 years old now, and I feel it pulling at me. That quiet and insistent need to go to the village. I do not fully understand it. I cannot explain it rationally, but it is there every morning when I wake up. This feeling like something unfinished is waiting for me at the end of a road I have not walked yet. My grandfather warned me. He prepared me as best he could, and even so I am terrified of whatever is waiting for me there, in the quiet between the trees, in the dark beyond the old well, in the face of a handsome stranger I have not met yet, but somehow already know is coming. Story 2. I do not know how to explain this properly, but I think something near my home has been changing reality for years. And I think I'm starting to notice it too late. Everyone in Checkers Lane knows the Red Brook Milk Factory. Not because people talk about it or bring it up in conversation, but because it is simply always there. You cannot avoid seeing it. Even when you try not to look, it sits at the very edge of your vision, like it belongs there, like it has always belonged there. Like the street would not make sense without it. It is one of those things you grow up with and stop questioning. The way you stop questioning why the sky is blue, or why certain houses on certain roads always feel colder than others. You just accept it. You file it away. You move on. Except I cannot move on anymore. Not after everything. The Red Brook Milk Factory rises above everything else on that street. Not just in height, though it is tall enough, but in weight. That is the only word I can think of that comes close. It feels heavy, like it is pressing down on the entire lane from above, sitting on the air itself, grinding everything beneath it into something smaller and quieter and more obedient. The steel silos catch the light in a way that does not always make sense, depending on where the sun is. The industrial pipes run in directions that seem to change if you look away and look back too quickly. And there are sections of the building that look noticeably newer than others, fresher, cleaner, like something was recently rebuilt or replaced or adjusted. I used to assume that was just maintenance, normal industrial upkeep. I do not assume that anymore. At night there is a sound, a low hum, constant and steady, sitting just below everything else like a foundation. It never changes pitch. It never speeds up or slows down. It just sits there, breathing almost, and once you notice it, once your brain finally picks it out from the background noise of the world, you cannot stop hearing it. It is there when the street is busy, and it is there when everything is silent. It is there when your windows are closed, and it is there when you are lying in bed at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, and trying to convince yourself that everything is fine. My grandfather worked at the factory when it first opened. At least that is what my family always said. He never explained what he actually did there, never used specific words like processing or operations or maintenance, never described a single task or a single shift. He just existed in relation to that building the way a shadow exists in relation to the thing casting it. Always connected, never fully explained. I accepted that too. For a long time, the way children accept things about the adults around them without asking the questions that would make those adults uncomfortable. Until one day when I was 11 years old. It was raining that afternoon. Not heavy rain, just that steady, unremarkable kind of rain that makes the whole world feel like it has been turned down a notch. Quieter and grayer and softer than it should be. We were sitting in his living room, my grandfather and I, and the television was on but muted. Through the window you could see the factory sitting in the distance, exactly where it always sat, doing exactly what it always did, which was nothing visible and everything felt. I asked him what it was like working there. He did not answer right away. He went somewhere else for a moment, just sat there looking forward at nothing, and I had this strange feeling that he was not staring into empty space, but listening to something I was not able to hear. Then he said that they told him it was dairy production. He paused for long enough that I thought he was done. Then he said it was not. He told me there were levels beneath the ground, floors that did not appear on any plans or any blueprints, floors that simply existed without being acknowledged, without being listed, without being real in any official sense. And then he said, the thing I have never been able to let go of, the thing I have turned over in my mind so many times, it has worn smooth like sea glass. He said that people went down to those levels, and not all of them came back the same. After that, he never spoke about it again. I tried once or twice over the following years, and each time he redirected the conversation so cleanly and so quickly that I almost doubted I had ever heard him say it at all. Life moved forward the way life does, filling in the gaps, keeping you busy, giving you enough new things to worry about that the old, unsettling things get pushed further back until they almost disappear. And for a while, it almost worked. Then people started disappearing. It did not seem connected at first. A teenager who walked home from a party and never arrived. A man who left work late one evening and simply was not there in the morning. People vanish sometimes. That is what everyone said, and that is what everyone wanted to believe, because the alternative required thinking too hard about the thing that had always been sitting at the edge of Checkers Lane, pressing down on everything with its invisible weight. But then it got closer. Children from the primary school began to go missing. A boy who stayed late for chess club and was last seen leaving the building. A girl who finished football practice and cut through the path behind the factory because it was faster, and she had done it 100 times before. No witnesses, no signs of struggle, no explanation that held up under even mild scrutiny. Just gone, in that clean and total way that does not feel like an accident. Every single case had one thing in common: the path that ran along the back of the Red Brook Milk Factory. I went there one night with my friend Prince. It was just past midnight. I told myself it was just to look, just to walk the path and feel the space, and maybe make it smaller in my head by standing in it. The air felt wrong the moment we stepped onto it. Not cold in the way that autumn is cold, but cold in a way that felt intentional, like warmth had been specifically removed rather than simply absent. My phone lost signal within a few minutes. Prince checked his and found the same. We looked at each other and kept walking because neither of us was willing to be the one who suggested going back first. The deeper we went, the more the world around us seemed to close down. The wind stopped. The distant traffic stopped. Even the ambient nighttime sounds of a city that never fully sleeps seemed to pull back and leave us standing in something that was almost silence, but not quite. Because underneath everything, steady and unbroken, was the hum. It was louder here. Not loud enough to be overwhelming, but loud enough to feel like it was coming from inside the ground, beneath our feet, like the earth itself was running on it. We found a metal door set into the ground. It was not old, and it was not rusted, and it did not look like something forgotten. It looked maintained, looked like someone came to it regularly, looked like it served an active purpose. But the surface of it was deeply scratched, marked in long, irregular lines that crossed over each other. And some of those marks had the particular depth and angle that comes from something pushing and dragging from the wrong side of a door, from the inside. Prince said we should leave. I opened it anyway. The door came down behind us the moment we were both inside. Not slowly, not with a creak, just shut, clean and final. And when I pushed against it, there was no give at all. No handle, no seam I could get my fingers into. Just sealed, like a lid on something that needed to be kept closed. The space below was concrete corridors lit by lights that flickered in a rhythm that almost felt like breathing. Pipes ran overhead and along the walls, thicker than they needed to be, branching in directions that made no structural sense. The hum was everywhere now, not directional anymore, but total, living in the walls and the floor and the ceiling and somewhere deeper than all of those things combined. My phone turned itself on for roughly 3 seconds and then died again. That should not have been possible. The battery had been fully charged. We walked. We did not know what else to do. The corridors continued, and we followed them. Then we found the rooms, enclosed in glass, visible from the corridor, each one a small square space containing a person standing completely still, not restrained, not lying down, just standing, eyes open, faces blank. I told myself they were mannequins or some kind of display, the way you tell yourself something manageable, when your brain cannot immediately process what it is actually looking at. Then one of them blinked, slowly, like blinking was something being done at it rather than by it, like a reflex that was running slightly behind the body performing it. They were alive. But something about them was wrong in a way that my vocabulary does not fully cover. It was like watching a video where the compression is slightly off, where the image is almost right, but there is something in the edges, something in the movement that tells you what you are seeing is not entirely real, like they were being held in a state that was not entirely stable, like something was working to maintain them and not quite succeeding. A man in a lab coat walked past us in the corridor without stopping and without looking at us. He spoke in the same tone someone uses when they are reading a note to themselves. No inflection, no acknowledgement that he was speaking to anyone in particular. He said that younger subjects stabilize for longer. Then he continued walking and turned a corner and was gone, and Prince and I stood there in the flickering light with the hum all around us and said absolutely nothing to each other for a very long time. We went deeper. I know we should not have. I know that every reasonable thought available to us at that point was pointing toward going back, finding a way out, breathing real air again. But we went deeper anyway, and I think now that we were meant to. I think the place wanted us to see the rest of it. The corridor opened into a massive chamber. Machines filled most of the space, large and purposeful, connected to each other by cables and pipes in ways that suggested a system far more complicated than anything being used to process dairy. And in the center of the chamber there was a tank, tall and cylindrical and filled with a pale liquid that had a faint light to it. And suspended inside that liquid were bodies, floating still, arms loose at their sides, faces turned slightly upward, eyes closed. There were more of them than I wanted to count, and each one was attached to something. Thin cables or tubing running from the back of the neck, from the temples, disappearing into the walls of the tank, and presumably into the machines beyond. I looked at them one by one, and then I stopped, because one of the faces I recognized. My grandfather's eyes were open, and they moved. They tracked to me slowly, adjusting, focusing, and there was recognition in them, clear and undeniable, looking at me the way you look at someone when you have been waiting a very long time for them to arrive and you are not sure whether to be relieved or horrified that they finally did. Everything in the room seemed to stop for a moment. Then the alarms started. Not loud, not sirens, but a low and pervasive tone that joined the hum and changed it slightly, added something urgent to its frequency. The facility shifted around us like it had become aware of something unwanted in its system. Like we were an error it was now trying to locate and address. We ran. The corridors were not the same as when we had walked through them. Doors appeared in walls that had been solid. Hallways that we were certain we had just come through ended differently than before, or led somewhere they had not led a few minutes ago. The place was rearranging itself around our movement, not chaotically, but deliberately, like it was solving a problem and we were the problem. Then, through a glass panel on one side, I saw my grandfather again. He was standing, not floating, standing and looking at me, and he pressed one hand flat against the glass, and the look on his face was the most complicated thing I have ever seen on another person. And he mouthed two words very clearly. Do not. I do not know what he meant. I still do not know. Do not come back. Do not tell anyone. Do not look for answers. Do not trust what you remember. I have run through every possibility, and none of them feel complete. We escaped. Or at least the factory let us out, which I have come to understand is not necessarily the same thing. Outside, the air was normal. The temperature was normal. Both our phones came back to life without explanation. The street was quiet and ordinary and gave no indication that anything had happened behind it. But it did not end there. Small things began to accumulate over the days that followed. A man I passed on my morning walk, walking the exact same route at the exact same pace with the exact same expression 2 hours later, like he had been reset. A child at the school gate near our road, completely frozen mid-step for just a moment that was slightly too long, and then continuing as if nothing had interrupted her at all. Moments in conversation that seemed to loop, a word repeated, a reaction slightly delayed as if something were loading. And always the hum. Everywhere now, not just near the factory. Then I started waking up at exactly 3:17 in the morning. No alarm, no sound that triggered it. Just awake every single night at the same precise moment. Prince called me one morning, and before I could say anything, he told me what time he had been waking up. It was the same. He told me he did not think it was repeating anymore. He said it felt more like something continuing, like a process that had always been running and was simply becoming more visible. Like scaffolding you suddenly notice around a building that has apparently been under construction the entire time you have lived next to it. Something was still building the world around us, adjusting it, smoothing it out. I went back to the path alone. The door in the ground was gone. The path itself looked different, not dramatically, just slightly. Like a room where someone has moved the furniture while you were asleep and tried to put it back exactly as it was, but not quite managed it. I could not find where the entrance had been, but I could still hear the hum, clearer there than anywhere else, sitting just beneath the surface of the ground like a pulse. My grandfather appeared in the way he appears now, which is not like seeing a person, but like receiving a message in a form that has the shape of a person. He told me the factory was not a factory. He said it was a correction system, something that observes reality, identifies its flaws and inconsistencies, and then rebuilds it. More stable each time, less prone to error, smoother, more consistent. He said the process had been running for longer than I knew and that most people never noticed, because the corrections happened in the parts of experience that the mind is least likely to examine closely. Then he told me that I was still seeing the errors, because I was one of them. An unstable element, something that did not fit cleanly into the version of reality the system was building. A variable that introduced inconsistency simply by existing and noticing and asking questions that the corrected world did not have space for. And he said that once I stopped seeing them, once the corrections reached me completely, I would not notice anything wrong ever again. I would not wake at 3:17. I would not hear the hum. I would not see the man walking the same route twice. I would not remember the tank or the glass rooms or his hand against the glass or the words he mouthed at me. Everything would feel exactly as it should, smooth, consistent, and permanent. I am writing this now because I do not know how much time I have before that happens. Because things are already getting smoother around me. The edges of things feel more certain than they used to. The hum is becoming something I have to concentrate to hear rather than something I cannot stop hearing. The small errors are appearing less frequently, or I am catching fewer of them, and I cannot tell which of those is true, and I am not sure it matters. If you are reading this and something feels slightly off, not dramatically wrong, but just slightly, just small things, moments that seem to repeat, reactions that come half a second too late, Sounds you can hear but cannot place, a low and steady hum beneath everything that you notice, and then forget, and then notice again, then you are still seeing it too. You are still outside the correction. You are still in error in the system's terms, which means you are still yourself in yours. But it will not stay that way forever. The system is patient. It does not rush. It simply continues, adjusting and smoothing and correcting, and one day you will wake up at a normal time, and the world will feel perfectly reasonable. And you will read something like this, and it will mean absolutely nothing to you. And you will move on with your day without a second thought. Because the Red Brook Milk Factory is not a building. It is not an operation or an institution, or even a place in any conventional sense. It is a process. It has always been a process, and processes do not stop. They do not get tired. They do not forget what they are doing, or lose interest, or decide it is not worth continuing. They simply run until everything is included. Even this, even me, even you. Story 3, I do not know where to start, but the mirror in my hallway is broken. And when I say broken, I do not mean cracked down the middle or hanging off the wall at a bad angle. I mean it does not work correctly. It does not do what mirrors are supposed to do. I am familiar with mirrors. I have used them my entire life, with varying degrees of success, and I know what they are supposed to show you. This one does not show you that, and whatever it is showing instead, it is getting worse. Let me back up. My apartment has a small hallway that connects the front door to the rest of the place. When I first moved in, I wanted to do something with that space, fill it up a little, make it feel less like a tunnel, and more like somewhere that belonged to a person. So I bought a mirror, slightly overpriced, the kind of purchase you justify by telling yourself it is both practical and decorative. I hung it above a small credenza, one of those pieces of furniture that is not quite a table and not quite a cabinet. The kind of thing you just call a whatever and move on. I put a bowl on top of it for my keys. The mirror was mostly aesthetic, but I used it sometimes for quick checks on my way out the door. I glanced to make sure nothing was obviously wrong before I committed to going outside and being seen by other people. A few weeks ago, I had a job interview. The whole reason I had moved here in the first place was this interview, this specific opportunity, and I had spent the better part of the morning losing my mind over my outfit. The tie alone took 40 minutes and 3 separate YouTube tutorials before I felt like I was getting anywhere close to acceptable. I checked my reflection in everything I could find. The bathroom mirror, the toaster, the kitchen window at the right angle, anything with enough of a surface to bounce my image back at me. That obsession followed me all the way down the hallway. As I passed the mirror on my way to the front door, I stopped without really deciding to stop. The way you do when something catches you automatically, and I reached up to adjust the knot one last time. I snugged it against my collar and moved it a little to the left, then a little back to the right, watching my reflection do the same. And then my reflection stopped doing the same. I watched him give the knot one final, satisfied tug. A small and private gesture of finishing something, of being done. A proud expression moved across his face. A confused one settled over mine. My hands were still at my collar. His were already moving away, already reaching toward the bowl on the credenza, already going for the keys. I slowly let my fingers relax, and I stood there watching my reflection turn toward the door and begin to walk away, out of the frame. And then I found myself looking down at my tie one more time before my hand moved to the door handle on its own. My heart was going fast by the time I got outside. I stood there breathing for a moment, trying to slow it down. Nerves, I told myself. It had to be nerves. The interview was important enough that my whole body was treating it like a threat, and stress does strange things to perception. You see what you expect to see. You fill in gaps. I convinced myself of this on the bus ride over, and I held on to it through the interview itself. And by the end of the day, I had pushed it far enough back in my mind that it was not taking up much space at all. Then they offered me the job, and it vanished completely, replaced by something lighter and warmer, and much easier to carry. The ride home felt different. I kept thinking about how I could actually afford the apartment now, how it might start feeling more like mine. When I opened the front door and walked into the hallway, it felt like a different place already, brighter somehow, more welcoming. And then I caught the mirror out of the corner of my eye and I stopped. My reflection was already at the credenza, already dropping the keys into the bowl. As I came level with the frame, I watched him step out the other side, a few feet ahead of me, ahead of where I actually was, moving through a space I had not reached yet. I dropped my keys a second later, and only then noticed that my feet were hitting the floor harder than usual, that I had been walking faster without meaning to, like something in me had decided to try and close the gap without consulting the rest of me first. I ended up standing at the end of the hallway, staring back at the mirror, somewhere between confused and unsettled, and not sure which one was winning. Then my phone rang. My sister calling about the job. I saw my face in the black glass of the screen before I answered, caught that exact combination of expressions, frozen there for just a second. I answered the call, talked to her, and let the normalcy of the conversation wash everything else out. After we hung up, I washed my face in the bathroom. Nothing strange about that mirror. Everything lined up. My movements and my reflection's movements happened at the same time, in the same direction, with the same expression, exactly as they should. I felt the exhaustion in my face and recognized it, and went to bed, ready to start something new in the morning. I woke up late the next day. I rushed through getting ready, moved through the hallway at a pace that did not allow for stopping, and genuinely do not remember looking at the mirror at all. 8 hours of first day onboarding later, I came home and checked it. My keys hit the floor before I realized I had dropped them. The mirror was empty. Not dark, not obscured, not distorted. Just empty. The hallway was there. The lights were there. The credenza was there. Everything that was supposed to be reflected was reflected. The only thing missing was me. I checked it from every angle I could think of, stepping left and right, crouching slightly, tilting my head, going through the geometry of it in my mind the way you do when you are trying to prove to yourself that what you are seeing has a logical explanation. Nothing changed. The hallway looked exactly right. I was simply not in it. I have lost my mind, I thought. That is the only rational explanation. The stress of the move, the interview, the pressure of all of it has finally added up to something, and now I am standing here having a breakdown over a mirror. But then a quieter thought followed immediately after. People who have actually lost their minds do not usually know it. If you can observe that something is wrong, if you can form the sentence, "This does not make sense," then something is still working. That does not exactly fix the problem, but it does change its shape slightly. I went to the bathroom mirror and stared at my own face in a way I had not done in a long time. The panic there was real and a little shocking, but the face itself was there, which was what I needed. The kitchen window at night made a decent enough mirror. That was fine. I drank a glass of water and watched my face bend and distort around the curve of the glass. Still there, just warped. The way things get when you look at them through the wrong kind of surface. I leaned against the counter and came to the only conclusion that made any practical sense. The mirror was broken. Not cracked, not falling off the wall, but broken in some functional way that I did not understand and was probably not going to understand. It had simply stopped working, and that is what I told myself. That is what I repeated until it became something I could put down and stop carrying around. The days that followed helped. Every other reflection I caught. The bathroom in the morning, windows, the screen of my phone, the glass doors of buildings on the way to work, they all worked fine. They all showed me exactly what they were supposed to show me. I filed those away, each one a small piece of evidence that I was not losing anything important. The hallway mirror became something I looked past rather than at. Background, decoration. Just taking up space the way I had always intended it to. Just not in the way I had expected. It became muscle memory. Come home, grab the keys, go. The mirror was just a shape on the wall, no more worth thinking about than the bus map at the stop outside my building, something you register without actually reading because you already know the route. I understood that something had gone wrong with it, and I did not understand what, and I had decided that I did not particularly need to. It faded. The way things fade when you stop looking directly at them. And then this morning, it started working again. I was not paying attention to it, which is probably the only reason it caught me off guard. It had become so thoroughly part of the background that I was not even directing my vision away from it anymore. I was just not looking in general. But something snagged in my peripheral vision, and my chest went tight before my brain had even caught up to what I was seeing. I exhaled sharply and realized I had been holding my breath without knowing it. I looked. He was on his way in as I was on my way out. He was wearing the same gray button-up I had on, the same khakis, but both were ruined. His shirt was torn in a way that spoke of something sudden and forceful, and streaked through with grease and dirt, dark patches ground into the fabric. There was a boot print stamped into the fabric just below his rib cage, the outline of a sole and heel clear enough that you could not mistake it for anything else. One of his eyes was purple and swollen, completely shut. The skin around it had gone dark, pulled tight. What was not scraped or bruised looked older than it should have, like something had taken years and applied them in the space of a few hours. He was leaning against the credenza, and he was staring straight ahead, and his one working eye did not find me the way eyes are supposed to find their own reflection. It was not like looking in a mirror. It was like looking through a window at someone who was looking at a wall. He lifted a hand and pressed it gently against his swollen eye. A tear ran through a thin line of dried blood on his cheek, cutting a clean path through it. Then his fingers moved slowly, carefully, pressing lightly against the damage the way you do when you are assessing something you already know is bad, just trying to figure out exactly how bad. I looked down. I needed a moment to look at something else, anything else. When I looked back, we had both lowered our heads, or at least I had, and what he was doing looked similar enough that it felt like the same thing translated into a different language. We lifted our heads at the same time. Our eyes met, mine to his one open eye, and they stayed there. Then we both went our separate ways. Him deeper into the apartment, me out the door. I left. But something about it came with me, settled somewhere behind my sternum and stayed there, like a weight that I was going to have to carry through the rest of the day, whether I wanted to or not. And honestly, the 2 weeks of the empty mirror felt easier now. At least then, I did not know what I was missing. At least then, there was nothing to look at. That was maybe 20 minutes ago. I am on the bus now. My chest is still tight in that specific way that is not quite pain, but is not comfortable either. The kind of feeling that sits just below the surface of everything else and makes all of it harder. I keep catching my reflection in the window beside me as the world moves past outside, and in the sides of cars as they pull up alongside the bus and then fall behind. They look fine. They look normal. I should stop checking them. But I'm not entirely sure that last one was fine. There was something about it, just for a second, something in the way it moved, and I looked away before I could be certain of what I was seeing, which means now I am sitting here not being certain in a much worse way. What happened to him? What is going to happen? Does it work like that? Does something that shows you the future also move toward it? Does what I saw this morning become what happens to me today? Is that how this goes? I do not know if it works like that. I do not know how any of it works. I just know what I saw, and I know what it was wearing, and I know what it looked like. And I know that the mirror spent 2 weeks showing me nothing, and then chose this morning to show me that. The brakes tap, and the whole bus shudders forward slightly, and my stomach drops every time, like we are always just barely stopping before something. Like there is always something just ahead of us. The 2 men in the seats behind me have been talking to each other since I got on. Quiet just below the level where you can make out the words, the kind of talking that is designed not to be overheard. I noticed them when I sat down, and I have not been able to stop noticing them since. Maybe it is nothing. Probably it is nothing. People talk on buses. People talk quietly. It does not mean anything, but I can feel them looking at the back of my head. That particular pressure of eyes that you learn to recognize without being able to explain how. And the more I try to convince myself it is nothing, the more that pressure seems to increase, and the tighter my chest gets, and the more the brakes feel like warnings rather than just brakes. I am going to get off at my stop. I am going to walk to work. Everything is going to be completely ordinary, and I am going to spend the day doing my job, and then I am going to come home, and the mirror is going to be wrong again, in whatever new way it has decided to be wrong, and I am going to figure out how to live with that the way I have been figuring out how to live with all of it. That is what I am telling myself right now. But I keep thinking about the boot print, the specific and deliberate shape of it. The way a mark like that only gets there if something or someone put it there on purpose. And I keep thinking about the eye that would not look at me. The one that was open and working and staring straight ahead at something I could not see from my side of the glass. I do not know what it was looking at. I am not sure I want to. Story 4 I posted here a few days ago about what happened at the Velvet Haze. I said I would not go back. I meant it when I typed it out. Meant it the way you mean things when you are still shaken. And the fear is fresh, and every part of your body is agreeing with the decision your brain just made. I turned down 2 more bookings there. Told the agency something had come up. Told myself it was not worth it. That whatever that place had going on inside its walls was not my problem, and did not need to become my problem. But I could not stop thinking about her, about Marla. About the photograph and the way she had looked at me in it. The way she had talked to me like she already knew who I was, like she had been sitting somewhere just out of sight and waiting for me to finally show up. I tried to leave it where it was. I genuinely tried. I kept myself busy, took other bookings, filled my evenings with noise and people and things that needed doing. But she kept coming back, not dramatically, not like a nightmare, just quietly, the way a word you cannot remember sits at the edge of your tongue and refuses to leave no matter how hard you try to move on from it. So a few days ago, I went back. No makeup, no heels, no costume, no performance version of myself, just regular clothes and flat shoes, and I told myself that mattered. That stripping away the performance stuff made it less real somehow, or at least made me less of a target for whatever I had been a target for before. I went during the day, not at night, and I held on to that difference like it was a kind of armor. Whatever I had seen before was just atmosphere, I told myself. Late nights and low lighting and the particular kind of adrenaline that builds up before you go on stage and then has nowhere to go afterward. The brain does strange things when it is running hot. That was all it was. Daylight would prove it. The Velvet Haze looks almost wrong in daylight. That is the first thing I noticed, and I could not entirely explain why. It is not that anything was out of place. It was more like the building was designed to be seen in a specific kind of light, and anything else revealed something it was not meant to show. The alley out back was empty and flat and gray. No music spilling out from somewhere inside. No crowd noise, no warmth. Just large bins and damp concrete and that smell. The one I had not been able to name the first time, and still could not name now. Something old and sweet and slightly wrong underneath, like something pleasant that had been left out too long. Inside was worse in its own way. The lights were on, but only barely, dim enough that the place still felt like it was holding on to the night before, like it had not quite let go of whatever had happened in it after closing time. No music, no voices anywhere, just a low and constant hum that seemed to come from the building itself, from inside the walls, from somewhere structural, like the place was still vibrating slightly, from being so full of people only hours earlier and had not finished settling back into itself. There was a man behind the bar cleaning glasses, older, heavy set, The kind of person who has done the same job in the same kind of place for long enough that almost nothing registers on his face anymore. He barely looked up when I came in. He told me they were closed. I told him I knew and that I had performed there a few weeks back and thought I might have left something in the dressing room. He did not argue, did not ask me to describe what I had left or offer to check for me. He just shrugged like the whole situation was not even slightly interesting to him and went back to his glasses. The hallway to the dressing room felt longer than I remembered it being. Not dramatically longer. Not in the way that happens in bad dreams where corridors stretch out ahead of you without end. Just longer enough that I noticed. Just long enough that my footsteps sounded louder than they should have, like I was the only thing making noise in a space that had been very quiet for a long time and did not especially want that interrupted. I kept my pace steady. I did not look back. The green room door was open a crack when I got there. Just enough that I could see a thin slice of the room before I pushed it. I told myself I had probably left it that way the last time I was there, that doors in old buildings do not always latch properly, that there was nothing in a partially open door to be afraid of. Inside, everything looked the same as I remembered it. The same cracked mirrors along the counter, each one reflecting the room back at a slightly different angle. The same bulb lighting around the frames, some of them dead, others flickering just barely. The same foam heads wearing their wigs, lined up and facing outward. Blank oval faces pointed at nothing in particular. The room felt empty in a way that was different from just not having anyone in it. It felt like something had been there recently and had either just left or had moved to somewhere in the room I was not able to see. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I started checking around because that was the reason I had given myself for being there, even though I did not actually know what I was looking for. Under the counter, along the shelves, in the corners. Anywhere that might plausibly hold something I might plausibly have left behind. I moved slowly and tried to keep my breathing even. That is when I saw the cigarette. It was resting on the counter, just sitting there by itself. No ashtray next to it, no pack nearby, no lighter. Nothing that would explain its presence in any ordinary way. Just the cigarette, placed neatly on the counter like someone had set it down for a moment and intended to come back for it. There was a smear of lipstick on the filter, dark, the deep red or burgundy color that belongs to a specific kind of woman who has been wearing it the same way for decades and has never once considered changing it. I stood there looking at it for a long time, longer than made sense. Then I picked it up, and it was warm. Not hot, not freshly lit, just warm in the way that an object is warm when a person has been holding it recently, when heat has transferred from skin to surface and not yet had the time to fade back into the cool air of the room. Someone had been holding this not long ago. Then I heard something behind me, not a voice, not a footstep, something smaller than both. Just the faintest suggestion of fabric shifting, the sound of material moving the way it does when a person adjusts their position or takes a step on a soft surface. I turned around. The room was empty. I left after that. I made myself walk, not run, because some part of me understood that running would mean admitting out loud to myself that I was afraid and that something was actually wrong, and I was not ready to do that yet. I kept my pace even and normal all the way down the hallway and past the bar, where the man with the glasses did not look up, and out through the front and into the alley. I found the nearest bin and dropped the cigarette into it. I remember doing that. I remember the specific texture of the bin lid and the way the cigarette turned end over end on its way down. I remember walking away. I went home. I tried to put the whole thing somewhere manageable in my mind and leave it there. That was 2 days ago. Last night, I was getting ready at a completely different venue. Different part of the city, different dressing room, different people moving around me doing their own getting ready routines, different music coming through the walls from the main floor. Everything was different. I had specifically chosen different. And then the smell came. Powdery and old-fashioned and strong enough that I physically turned around expecting someone to be standing right behind my shoulder, close enough to touch. There was no one there. The people nearest to me were on the other side of the room, not paying attention to me doing their own thing. I stood there for a moment and told myself it was in my head, and I almost believed it. The way you almost believe something when the alternative is too uncomfortable to sit with. Then I checked my bag. I do not know what made me do it. Some instinct that had already figured out what my conscious mind was still catching up to. I opened the bag and looked inside. The cigarette was there. The same one. Same shape, same size, same dark smear of lipstick on the filter. The one I had dropped into a bin in an alley on the other side of the city 2 days before. I left it there. I did not take it out, did not throw it away again, did not say anything to anyone around me. I closed the bag, and I finished getting ready, and I went on, and I performed. Because that is what you do when your whole body is telling you that something is very wrong, but the show is still in 20 minutes and there are people waiting. You go on, you get through it, you deal with the rest afterward. But afterward has been getting worse instead of better. I woke up this morning and the smell was in my flat. Not coming through the window, not drifting in from outside, not the kind of smell that has a clear origin you can locate and address. Just present, settled into the air the way smells settle when they have been somewhere long enough to become part of it. I opened all the windows anyway, stood in the cross breeze and waited, told myself it was coming from the street below, from a neighbor, from anywhere that was not the explanation I was actually afraid of. The smell did not go anywhere. It just stayed, patient and still, like it was not bothered by the fresh air at all. About an hour after that, I went into the bathroom. The mirror was fogged. Not from a shower, because I had not had one. Not from steam, because I had not been in that room in hours and had not used any hot water. The fog was just there, covering the glass evenly. The kind of condensation that should not have been able to build up in a cold bathroom on an ordinary morning. And through it, in the surface of the fogged glass, someone had written something. One word, drawn in the condensation with a single finger, pressed just hard enough to be legible. I wiped it away before I had fully processed what I was doing. Pure instinct, the kind that kicks in before fear has had a chance to properly arrive, the animal part of you that just reacts. My hand was moving before my brain had caught up, but I had seen enough. Just that one word. Sitting there in the fogged glass of my bathroom mirror on an ordinary morning in my flat, in a room where no one else had been. Finally, I've been sitting with that word for the last hour, and I keep arriving at the same place, no matter how many different directions I try to approach it from. I do not think she was lonely the way a person gets lonely. The missing of people and warmth and connection. I think it was something colder and more deliberate than that. I think she was waiting. And I think whatever I did when I went back to the velvet haze in the daylight, telling myself it was safe, telling myself I was just looking for something I had left behind, I think I gave her exactly the opening she needed. I think that was the invitation. The smell is stronger now than it was this morning. It has not faded with the windows open, has not shifted or thinned out the way smells do when they belong to something ordinary. I do not smoke. I have never smoked a single cigarette in my life. And there is ash on my kitchen counter. A small pile of it, neat and gray, sitting on the surface next to the sink like it has always been there, like it belongs in my home. I do not know what I did. I do not know how to undo it. I do not even fully know what it is I am dealing with. Just the shape of it, just the edges, just the feeling of something very old and very deliberate settling into my space like it has been planning to for a long time and is in absolutely no hurry now that it has finally arrived. I have been trying to think of what to do, and every option I consider feels either useless or like it would make things worse, and I'm not sure anymore which direction worse is even in. If anyone has been through something like this, if any part of this sounds familiar to you, please tell me. Tell me what you did. Tell me if there is something that works, something that creates distance between you and a thing that has already decided it wants to be close. Tell me there is a way back from this that does not involve just waiting to find out what finally means. Because the ash was not there an hour ago, and the smell is stronger now than it was when I started to writing this. And I am trying very hard not to look at the bathroom mirror from where I am sitting. But I can see it from here. I can see the edge of the frame. And I think the glass might be fogging again. Story 5. I have always loved Edinburgh. Even before I ever set foot there, I was obsessed with the way the city looks like it grew out of the hills instead of being built on them. The steep streets, the stone buildings, the way the castle sits up high like it has been watching everyone for centuries. Edinburgh feels beautiful, but not in a soft or gentle way. It feels like beauty that survived something, like it has teeth. What pulled me in even more was the history. Not the clean, polite version you get in tourist brochures, but the messy, violent, traumatic history people whisper about when they think no one is listening. The kind of history that makes a place feel heavy, like the ground remembers. I had read and heard stories for years, the kind of stories that make you uncomfortable, even when you are safe in your own home. Stories about huge fires in the city long ago, about people living under the streets in vaults and chambers because they had nowhere else to go. Those underground vaults, from what I understood, were originally meant to be storage spaces for merchants, a place to keep goods out of sight and out of the weather. But the rock they were built into was porous, And Edinburgh is not exactly known for dry weather. Water would seep through, dampness would settle into everything, and anything stored down there could rot or spoil. So people stopped using them for what they were meant for, and the vaults became these abandoned spaces that no one wanted to claim. And then, from what I'd heard, people with nowhere else to go started hiding there. Homelessness was treated like a crime back then. Whether every detail of those stories was accurate or not, the idea stuck with me. People forced underground, living in the dark, surrounded by wet stone, because the world above them had decided they did not deserve space. There was another part of those stories that always made my stomach turn. The idea that when the city burned, the heat did not just stay above ground. It seeped down, through cracks, through stone, through the same porous rock that made the vaults useless in the first place. And people trapped down there would have had nowhere to run. No air, no light, no exits they could reach in time. Just heat, building and building until the underground became a sealed oven. On top of that, there were the witchcraft stories. Edinburgh has so many of them that you can barely separate the real history from the myths people tell to entertain themselves. And even then, a lot of what people called witchcraft was not magic the way movies show it. It was just early medicine, herbs, natural remedies, knowledge passed down quietly, often by women. But none of that mattered once fear took over. People got accused, dragged out, and killed publicly. A city can carry that kind of thing in its bones. All of that fascinated me. I do not say that proudly, like I enjoy suffering, but I have always been drawn to places where the past still feels close. Places where the air feels like it has layers. So when I got the chance to visit Edinburgh in December 2022, I was genuinely excited. I felt like I was finally going to step into the city I had imagined for years. Originally, the plan was simple. 4 of us. Me, 2 friends, and my girlfriend at the time, who is my wife now. We booked it as a 3-night, 4-day trip. The idea was to split it between scenic stuff and the darker side of Edinburgh. Long walks, viewpoints, old streets, and then the scary experiences too, like a midnight tour of a huge cemetery. I remember someone telling us it was the largest in Europe, and whether that was true or not, it sounded perfect for what we wanted. For the first 2 nights, we stayed in a hostel. For the last night, we booked an Airbnb with 2 bedrooms. It felt like a treat at the end of the trip, a chance to sleep properly before going home, have a bit of privacy, maybe cook something or order in and eat like normal people instead of living out of backpacks. Then one of my friends backed out at the last moment. That changed the dynamic a bit, but we still went. It ended up being me, my girlfriend, and 1 friend. We had already planned everything, and none of us wanted to cancel. The trip was amazing. Edinburgh was exactly what I hoped it would be. The city had that sharp winter feeling, cold air that makes you feel awake, streets that shine a little after rain. The views were unreal. The old buildings looked like they belonged in a different world. Even the crowds, even the tourist energy did not ruin it. If anything, it made me think about how many people had walked those streets before us for reasons much darker than sightseeing. Everything felt right, until the final night. We checked out of the hostel around 12:30 in the afternoon. We did not want to drag our luggage around all day, so we left it in the hostel's storage room. Then we went out and spent the rest of the day walking around. We ate, we explored, we did the kind of wandering you only do in a city you are trying to absorb before you have to leave it. By the time evening rolled around, we were exhausted in that good way, the kind of tiredness that feels earned. We decided to check into the Airbnb around 7 or 8 p.m. It was not too far from the hostel, and our bags had wheels, so we just walked there. The only problem was the flat was on the 3rd floor, and there was no elevator. The stairwell was narrow in that old building way, with steps that felt slightly uneven, like they had been worn down by decades of feet. I was the only guy in the group, and I did the obvious thing. I told them I would carry the bags upstairs. I tried to make it sound casual, like it was nothing. But really, I just wanted it done quickly. I also wanted to get the lighter bags up first so I could come back down and deal with the heavier ones after. So I went up alone. The door to the flat was dark gray, and there was a metallic number 3 screwed right into the center. Something about that detail stuck in my mind, the way it was placed, like it wanted to be noticed. I unlocked the door. The moment I stepped inside, I felt it. That shift. It was not a sound or a sight. It was a feeling in my body. The kind of feeling you get when you walk into a room and realize you are not alone, even though you cannot see anyone. The skin on my arms tightened. My stomach went a little cold. And very quickly, before I even looked around properly, I felt like I was being watched. My first reaction was practical. I had this immediate urge to check all the windows and the balcony doors, like if I could confirm everything was locked, then I could calm down. I walked through the space, moving faster than I meant to, touching locks, checking handles, looking out into the dark street below. The whole apartment was clean. Not just tidy, but freshly cleaned in that obvious Airbnb way where you can tell someone had been paid to make it perfect. There was a kind of 1980s theme going on. It was subtle, but clear. The colors, the furniture shapes, the way things were placed. The kitchen had modern appliances designed to look old, like that retro style you see now. A pastel toaster with rounded corners, the kind of thing that looks cute in photos. The dining table was dust-free. 4 chairs were pushed in neatly. Utensils were set out like someone cared about symmetry. Forks and spoons lined up with effort. Nothing looked out of place. Nothing except one thing. In our bedroom, there was an empty wardrobe, and one of its doors was wide open. That should not have mattered. A wardrobe door being open is not exactly shocking, but in a place where someone had taken the time to line up cutlery neatly by plates where everything else was spotless, it bothered me. It felt wrong. It felt like the one imperfect detail that pointed at something else. I stood there staring at it, caught on it in a way I could not explain, and that is when I heard my girlfriend and my friend coming up the stairs. I could hear their voices in the stairwell, breathy from the climb, and the normal sound of them snapped me out of my fixation. I walked forward quickly and shut the wardrobe door. Then I went back out into the living room like nothing had happened. They walked in and immediately started reacting the way people do when they see a nice place after staying in a hostel. They were impressed. They were excited. They did not feel anything wrong. They moved around naturally, commenting on the decor, pointing out little details, planning where they would sleep. Meanwhile, I tried to act normal and started bringing bags into the bedroom. And that is when I noticed something else I had completely missed on my first quick inspection. The two bedrooms were right next to each other. They should have shared a wall. That was the normal layout. But from the living room, you could clearly see there was a gap between them. Not a small gap either. There was enough space that it looked like you could fit a narrow storage room in between. I stared at it longer, trying to understand what I was seeing, and then I realized why it looked so strange. There was something there, a door. The owner had covered it with wallpaper, but not well enough. You could still see the outline, the edges pressing through like a bruise under skin. If you looked at it from the right angle, you could practically see where the handle should have been. It was like someone had tried to hide it, but also wanted it to remain visible, like a secret that still needed to breathe. That was the moment I stopped telling myself I was just being silly. Ever since I was a kid, I have had this thing. I do not talk about it much, because I know how it sounds. But sometimes, very rarely, I walk into a place and get a feeling so strong it is impossible to ignore. A certainty that something is wrong. Not, this is creepy wrong, but leave now wrong. In 30 years, I have felt it maybe 3 times. This was one of them. Goosebumps ran up my arms and across my back. It was like my body recognized something before my mind could label it. First, it was the feeling of being watched the second I stepped inside. Then the wardrobe door opened like something had been interrupted. And now this hidden room, not even hidden properly, sitting between the bedrooms like an extra space the apartment was not supposed to have. What kind of Airbnb was this? By the final night in Edinburgh, we were exhausted. The good kind of exhausted, but still exhausted. We decided to order food in and eat at the dining table, partly because we were tired of spending money eating out, and partly because we wanted to enjoy the fancy cutlery and pretend for a moment like we lived there. My girlfriend and my friend talked and laughed, and I tried to join in, but my attention kept drifting back to that wallpapered outline, to the wardrobe, to that feeling that someone was watching us from somewhere inside the walls. We finished dinner. We talked a little more. We did the normal end-of-day stuff. Then we went to bed. Our bedroom was the larger one. It was long, with 2 big windows on the left side. Blackout curtains covered them completely. The bed's headboard was against the wall, which meant that door-shaped outline, that hidden space, was directly behind us as we slept. On the other side of the room there was a couch, and right next to it was the wardrobe. The wardrobe fit the theme too. Old-looking, heavy, the kind of wardrobe you expect to see in a horror movie. It was about 3/4 the height of the wall, with a Victorian look to it, dark wood, carved edges, and doors that looked like they would creak even when they did not. We were so tired that my girlfriend and I fell asleep almost instantly. And that is where things changed. I woke up around midnight with that same feeling of being watched. Only now it was stronger because I was half asleep and my mind was trying to figure out whether the fear was real or just a dream. My heart was racing. My breathing felt too loud in the quiet room. I was awake, but I kept my eyes shut because I was scared that if I opened them, I would see something I could not explain. Still, I opened my eyes slightly. just enough to see through my eyelashes. My gaze went straight to the wardrobe. The door was open again, just slightly, like someone had pulled it and then stopped halfway. At first, I thought I saw something hanging over the edge of the door, something dark. My tired brain tried to make it into a coat or a scarf or some trick of the shadows. Then I realized it looked like hair, long black hair. My eyes shifted upward slowly because some part of me was trying to delay what I already knew I was going to see. Pale hands were gripping the top edge of the wardrobe door. Fingers curled over it like someone was using it to balance. A white robe draped down, loose and thin, catching the dim light in a way that made it look almost gray. And above that, a face hidden behind the curtain of hair. Someone was crouched on top of the wardrobe, watching me. My whole body went cold. I could not move. I could barely breathe. It did not feel like sleep paralysis exactly, because I felt awake, but my fear was so huge that it may as well have been physical. I lay there staring through my lashes, terrified that the moment I moved, the moment I made it obvious I could see it, it would do something. Maybe my breathing was loud enough, or my heart was pounding so hard the bed was shaking, because it woke my girlfriend. We had already been together for 8 years by then, and she knew about my intuitions. She had heard me talk about the few times I had walked into a place and known something was wrong. So when she asked what was wrong, I did not hesitate. I told her there was someone on top of the wardrobe. I told her what I could see. She sat up and looked, and she could not see anything. Not even a shape, not even a shadow. But she could see me. She could see my face and how I was breathing, how my body was tense like I was about to snap. She reached over and turned on the bedside lamp. The room lit up, and the figure disappeared instantly. Not like smoke, not like mist, not like something fading away. It vanished like a glitch, like the world skipped forward a few frames and the thing that had been there was simply no longer included. 1 second, pale hands and hair and a white robe. The next, nothing but the wardrobe closed except for that slightly open door which now looked normal and harmless and impossible. We kept the lamp on for the rest of the night. I do not know how I managed to fall asleep again, but I did, probably from pure exhaustion. I must have slept for a while because when I woke up again it felt later, and the feeling was back. This time it was worse. The lamp was still on, throwing soft light across the room, but it did not help at all. If anything, the dread was stronger. My heart started racing again. My breathing got heavy. It felt like my body was reacting to something my eyes had not even seen yet. I was lying on the right side of the bed. I kept my eyes closed again, terrified of what I might see if I opened them. I reached out to my left and touched my girlfriend's arm. She was there. She was warm, real. And that made it worse because I could sense someone else too. Right beside me, standing by the bed, a woman. The woman. The same one from the wardrobe. It felt like she was leaning over me, like she was looking down at my face. And the worst part was not even the idea of her eyes. It was the sense of her hair, long and close, like it was inches from my skin. I was terrified that if I opened my eyes, I would be staring straight into something I could never forget. My girlfriend woke up again, thank God, and immediately knew something was wrong. She told me there was nobody there. She sounded scared, too, this time, not because she could see anything, but because she could feel how real it was to me. I whispered back that the woman was right next to me, that she was standing there, that she was leaning in. My girlfriend got out of bed anyway. She turned on all the lights. Even with my eyes closed, I could feel the room brighten, the harsh overhead light filling every corner. And again, the figure vanished, the same way. Like a mistake being corrected, like it had never been there at all. We kept all the lights on until morning. Neither of us slept properly after that. We just lay there, listening to the sounds of the building, waiting for daylight like it was a rescue. In the morning, we had plans, and we checked out quickly. We did not stand around. We did not inspect the wallpaper door. We did not open the wardrobe. We got our things, left, and went out into the city like normal tourists, like nothing had happened. Our friend had slept alone in the second bedroom. She scares easily, especially with horror stories, and we did not want to ruin the rest of the trip for her, so we did not tell her anything at the time. We waited. We kept it between us. A few months later, when we were back home and the trip had settled into memory, we finally told her. She looked confused and said she remembered feeling completely fine that night. She said she slept like a baby. I have not had an experience like that since, nothing even close. I have been back to Edinburgh once more because I truly do love the city, and I refuse to let that one night ruin it for me. I obviously did not stay in that Airbnb again. Nothing happened on the second trip. No strange feelings, no watching presence, no open wardrobe doors, no hidden rooms pressing through wallpaper. But I still think about that night. Sometimes I will remember the exact shape of the wardrobe, the way the door sat open just a little, the way the hair hung down, the pale hands gripping the top edge like it was nothing, like the laws of balance did not apply, and I will feel the same cold rush in my chest that I felt lying in that bed, trying not to breathe too loud. Even writing it down brings it back. The fear, the helplessness, the way the light made it vanish like it was never real, even though it felt more real than most things I have ever seen. And more than anything, I remember how grateful I was that my girlfriend, my wife now, was there next to me, waking up when she did, turning on the light, pulling me back into the normal world again and again. Because I do not know what would have happened if I had been alone. Story 6. I'm just a regular police officer from a northern state in Mexico. It's close to the U.S. border. Nothing special. I'm not some detective who handles murders. I don't get called to big cases or secret operations. Most days I'm on traffic duty, or I'm posted at some public event because Civil Protection asked for police presence. The work is usually boring, and honestly, that's how I like it. But none of that protected me from seeing something so horrible that it still keeps me awake. Some nights I lie there staring at the ceiling, thinking about it, replaying it in my head, wondering if talking about it is a stupid decision. I'm writing this like I'm confessing into a dark room. I don't know if it's safe. I don't know if it's smart. I only know that keeping it inside has started to feel worse than the risk of letting it out. I understand how sensitive this is. It's illegal information. Even if I'm posting it to strangers behind fake usernames, even if I keep names and locations vague, I know what I'm doing is dangerous, so I'm going to change details. I'm going to stay general. I'm going to protect myself as much as I can while still telling the truth of what happened. Everyone here knows the biggest tragedy in this country is insecurity. Organized crime is everywhere, like a second weather system that follows you around. People argue about who's responsible, who's corrupt, who's trying, who's failing. I'm not here to debate politics. I've heard all the opinions. I've lived inside the results. That's enough for me. I'm sorry for the long introduction, but I need you to understand the kind of officer I am before you understand why what happened shook me so badly. If I was a trained investigator, maybe this would have turned into a case. If I was special forces, maybe I would have reacted differently. But I'm not. One night, I was on traffic patrol with my partner. I'll call him Andres. It was a normal shift, the kind where the hours stretch out and you count the minutes between calls. We were parked near a road where people always speed, the same spot we always sit in because we can actually catch them there. The radio was quiet. The air was cool. Everything felt ordinary, like any other night where the biggest problem would be a drunk driver or someone yelling at us because they didn't want a ticket. Then a gray van flew past us, like the driver didn't care about anything. Andres looked at me, and I already knew what he was thinking. We pulled out and followed it. We turned on the lights. The van didn't slow down. We hit the siren. Still nothing. We chased him for a couple of blocks. Not a high-speed chase like in movies, but fast enough that your stomach tightens and your brain starts going through all the ways it could go wrong. Finally, the van slowed and pulled over. The moment I stepped out of our patrol car, I felt that small shift that happens when something is about to become a problem. It wasn't dramatic yet, just a feeling. I walked toward the driver's side, and as I approached, I glanced at his rearview mirror. I could see him moving inside, jerky and nervous, like he was trying to decide whether to run or fight or beg. For a second, our eyes met through that mirror. I will never forget what I saw in his face. Not anger, not annoyance, terror. It wasn't the fear of getting a ticket. It was the fear of someone who knows he's already deep into something worse than the police. The fear of a man who is trapped between two kinds of danger and doesn't know which one will kill him first. That was enough warning for me to slow down and approach carefully. My hand went to the weapon on my belt. I didn't draw it, but I was ready. I told myself to keep my distance, to keep my angle, to watch his hands. Then the door burst open, and the man jumped out. He was short, with messy hair, dressed like a normal guy you'd see at a convenience store. T-shirt, jeans, nothing that screamed criminal. But his body language was chaos. He didn't even look at me properly. He just moved, like his mind had already left the scene, and his body was trying to catch up. I took a defensive stance, but I'm going to be honest with you. We are not known for great training. People joke about us all the time. They call us Maruchan cops, like instant noodles, because you can become an officer after a short course, and suddenly they send you out into the street like you're ready for anything. We get the basics, we learn some theory, we learn some practical things. But we are not built for real danger, not the kind that comes with organized crime. So when that man exploded out of the van, catching me off guard, my first reaction wasn't heroic. It wasn't brave. It was pure instinct. I moved back and ended up behind the van, using it as cover. Cowardly? Probably. But I'm alive to admit it. Andres jumped out of the patrol car like he'd been shot from a cannon. He ran past me at full speed, chasing the driver down the street. I watched him go, and I froze for a second, not sure what my job was now. Do I follow? Do I stay with the vehicle? Do I call it in? My mind felt stuck between choices. That's when I heard it. Banging. It came from the back of the van, from the exact door I was standing near, the exact spot where I had been hiding seconds earlier. A heavy, repeated odor, like someone was hitting the inside of the door, or kicking it, or throwing themselves against it. The sound was muffled by metal, but it was desperate. My skin went cold. I stepped back, took a breath, drew my weapon, and reached for the back door handle. When I pulled it open, darkness spilled out like a thick cloth. At first I saw almost nothing, just black space. Then, in the faint light coming from street lamps, I saw small points of reflection, the way animal eyes catch light at night. Little glints, too many of them clustered together. It took my brain a moment to understand what I was looking at. Eyes. I pulled out my flashlight and shined it inside. There were people in there, at least a dozen. Small bodies packed close. Kids. Mostly girls, but not all. Their hands and legs were tied. Their mouths were covered with tape. Some were crying silently. Some were shaking so hard their whole bodies trembled. The moment the light hit them, many squeezed their eyes shut, or turned away like it hurt, like they couldn't handle being seen. But the ones who looked at me, they looked at me like I was the last door between them and something worse. I just stood there like an idiot, weapon in hand, flashlight shaking slightly, trying to make sense of it. It felt unreal, like my mind refused to accept it, like the scene didn't fit inside the normal world I lived in. My thoughts stumbled. My mouth went dry. And then something even stranger happened. I felt a pressure in my head, like a slow hand pushing down on my thoughts, a feeling I can't explain. It was like a part of me wanted to close the door, like something inside my body was whispering, "Shut it, turn away, forget you saw this, go back to work, pretend it's nothing." The urge was strong enough that it scared me almost as much as what I was seeing. I turned off my flashlight because I thought maybe it was hurting them. The darkness returned. But those little points remained, their eyes still catching the light from outside, still watching me. And then Andres returned, out of breath, moving fast, and stopped beside me. "What the hell?" he said, panting. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. My voice felt trapped somewhere in my throat. He looked where I was looking, and the moment his brain caught up, he reacted like I did, just in a louder way. "Holy shit," he said. And then he kept cursing under his breath like the words could keep him from vomiting. I finally managed to speak, but what came out wasn't even the important part. "Did he get away?" I asked. Andres nodded, still trying to catch his breath. "Yeah, I couldn't catch him, but he dropped his phone. I think we can find him with this." He held it out to me. The phone was unlocked. The screen was bright. It looked normal, like any other phone in any other hand. That normality made me angry. It made me sick, like the world was mocking me by letting something so ordinary be connected to something so evil. Andre stared into the van again. Then he looked around. up and down the street like he expected someone to appear. "They're coming," he said, and his voice sounded tight. He stepped toward one of the children and carefully peeled the tape away from her mouth, trying not to hurt her. The moment her mouth was free, she started crying loud and broken, like the sound had been trapped inside her for too long. "It's okay," Andre said, trying to calm her. "You're safe now." But there was something in his voice that bothered me. Not because it was cruel, because it sounded like he was forcing the words out, like he needed to say them, but he didn't fully believe them. I heard sirens in the distance. Backup was coming. That should have made me feel relief, but it didn't. Not really. My mind was racing. I knew these were my last seconds to look at the phone before someone higher up took it. Whatever happened next, it would be out of my hands. So I did what I could. Google Maps was open. The route on the screen pointed to somewhere outside the city, somewhere empty, somewhere in the middle of nowhere. I zoomed in, trying to recognize roads. Nothing familiar. Then I went deeper. I checked the search history. That's where my blood went cold. Orphanages, churches, schools, hospitals, and more empty locations, pins dropped in places that looked like dirt roads and fields and nothing else. Even with my limited experience, I understood the pattern. The driver was picking up kids from places where kids exist in groups, where it's easy to hide someone missing for a little while, where adults are stretched thin and paperwork can swallow details. Then he delivered them to locations sent to him that same day. The delivery points changed every time, probably to avoid creating a trail. My hands were moving fast, but my mind was still stuck on the van. Andres came closer, watching me, tense. I opened messages, calls, anything that looked useful. I pulled out my notebook and started writing down what I could. Phone numbers, coordinates, names or usernames, anything that might matter later. Andres didn't like it. I could tell from his face, from the way he breathed, from the way he watched me, like I was making a mistake that could get both of us killed. But I didn't stop. Not then. Not with those kids in the dark behind me. One phrase kept appearing in the messages, again and again, like a code, like a rule, like an instruction that everyone involved understood. Wants to observe. I wrote that down too. Then another patrol car arrived, and my whole body tightened with relief because finally, more police, more support, more people to help. But when the doors opened, it wasn't municipal patrol. It was state investigative police, agents I didn't recognize, which was normal. There are too many agencies, too many faces, and half the time you don't know who is who. What wasn't normal was that nobody else came. No more units. No National Guard. No flood of sirens. No big response like you would expect when a van full of kidnapped children is found on a city street. Just these two agents, calm and controlled, walking like they were arriving to handle a simple paperwork issue. One of them looked at me and Andres, then looked at the van, then back at us. "You can leave now," he said. It didn't sound like advice. It sounded like an order. I hesitated. Everything in me wanted to argue, to say no, to stay, to do my job, but Andres put a hand on my shoulder, firm. "Let's go," he said. His eyes were wide in a way I'd never seen before. He wasn't just scared. He looked like he knew something I didn't. Like he had seen this kind of thing before, or heard about it, or understood how dangerous it was to be standing in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong curiosity. So I got back in the patrol car. Andres started the engine, and we drove away. I kept looking back in the side mirror, watching the scene get smaller, watching the van disappear behind us, watching the street swallow everything like it had never happened. The ride was silent for a while. The silence felt thick. It felt wrong. My mind kept returning to those eyes in the dark, the tape on mouths, the ropes on wrists, and the way the state agents told us to leave like we were inconveniences instead of officers. And then Andres spoke. "That thing," he said without looking at me. "Throw it away." I knew what he meant. My notebook, the numbers, the coordinates, the phrase. I didn't answer. He made a U-turn, and I snapped at him without thinking. "Where are you going? Aren't we going to look for that guy?" Andres didn't even flinch. "No," he said. "We're going back to the station, and I'm going to give you advice. Don't say anything about what we saw. Don't ask about it. Don't even hint at it. And I'll say it again. Whatever you wrote down, throw it away. Burn it. Forget it." My blood boiled. Anger rose like heat in my chest. But under the anger was something else, something colder. A sense that Andres wasn't being lazy or heartless. He was being practical. He was trying to keep us alive. Because we're traffic cops. We're not trained to hunt people like that. We're not trained to fight the kind of groups that can make a scene disappear from the news like it never happened. Still, what bothered me most was how hard he refused to go deeper, not even talk about it, not even ask questions. Like he knew the questions themselves were dangerous. The rest of my shift passed in a blur. I did the motions. I answered calls. I stood in places where I was supposed to stand, but my head wasn't there. I kept thinking about those children. I kept thinking about the phone. And I kept thinking about the way the state agents showed up alone, took control, and told us to leave. When I got off shift, I left the station without saying goodbye to anyone. I went straight to my car, drove through the city like I was chasing a thought. I checked local Facebook pages, the amateur journalists who rush to scenes and live stream everything. I expected even a rumor. There was nothing. No post, no blurry video, no gossip, no something happened near the street. Nothing at all. Like the world had been corrected. Like it had never happened. I stopped at an OXXO, bought a cheap phone and a SIM card, and went home. My hands were steady when I paid. My face was calm. But inside, I felt like my chest was packed with wires. At home, I sat down and stared at the notebook. Andres's warning echoed in my head. Throw it away. Burn it. Forget it. But then I saw those eyes again in my memory. So I did the opposite. I added one of the numbers I had written down into the cheap phone. I stared at the screen, trying to decide what to say. My thoughts were messy, half anger, half fear, half something I can only describe as a need to know. Not for curiosity, not for entertainment, for reality. Because if I didn't look, then it was like I was helping them hide it. The phrase from the messages came back to me. Wants to observe. My thumbs hovered over the keypad. Then I typed, simple and stupid and honest. I also want to observe. Send. The moment the message went out, I felt regret hit me like a punch. My skin went hot. Sweat formed on my palms. I held the phone too tightly, like I could squeeze the consequences back inside it. I sat there for minutes, frozen, listening to the sounds of my home. Every little noise felt louder than it should. the refrigerator hum, a distant car, a dog barking somewhere far away. My mind started to drift like my brain was trying to protect itself by shutting down. Then the phone vibrated. The sound and movement jolted me so hard my whole body jerked. My heart slammed in my chest. I looked at the screen. An SMS. My throat felt tight as I opened it. It was an image, very dark. At first I couldn't understand what I was seeing. Then my eyes adjusted. There was a person in the photo standing in shadow. The face wasn't visible. Not because of blur, but because of placement. Whoever took the picture made sure the light didn't reach the face. But in the foreground, right where you couldn't miss it, was something around the person's neck. A necklace, like a rosary. But wrong. The beads, if you could call them beads, were too large, too round, too wet-looking, even through a phone screen. The photo was framed so that the necklace stood out more than the person wearing it, like it was the point of the message. And when my brain finally understood what those beads were, my stomach twisted so hard I thought I might pass out. They were eyes, eyeballs, hanging in a chain, tied together with thin cord. You could see the pale shine. You could see the shape. Even in the dark, you could tell what they were. I stared at the screen so long my eyes hurt. I focused so hard on the necklace that I didn't notice what was behind the person at first. 2 faint points of light. I turned my brightness all the way up, leaned closer, and forced myself to look. A chair. And on it, a small child, tied up. The face was hard to see, but the eyes were clear, terrified. The same kind of terrified I'd seen inside the van. Another message arrived right after. A string of letters and numbers that meant nothing to me for half a second. Then I saw how it started. BC1Q, Bitcoin. That's when a different kind of fear entered my body. Not just fear of violence, fear of how organized it was, how casual it was, how quickly they responded, like they were waiting for someone like me to step out of line. And then I had a thought that made me feel even colder. They were sending this through normal SMS, a normal phone number, something that in theory could be traced. But they didn't care. Or they knew it wouldn't matter. Or they knew the people who trace things are part of it. I sat there in silence, staring into the air, trying to breathe. I remembered Andres' face when he told me to forget. I remembered the state agents ordering us away. I remembered the empty news feeds like the event had been erased. Then the phone vibrated again. A video. My fingers shook as I lifted the phone. It felt heavier now. Like it wasn't just plastic and cheap electronics anymore. Like it was a doorway. As I stared at the screen, the light in my room flickered slightly. Once. Twice. A cold feeling slid across my skin like a draft, but there were no windows open. The air felt wrong. The space felt invaded. I tried to tell myself it was stress, that my brain was making patterns, that electricity flickers sometimes, but I knew that wasn't what this was. I gathered what courage I had left and pressed play. The same person was in frame again, filmed close, chest and neck visible, face still hidden. The necklace of eyes moved slightly as the person breathed. The room the video was filmed in looked dark and empty, but the darkness didn't feel natural. It felt intentional, like a stage. The person's hand rose and touched the first eye in the chain, like counting beads. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. First mystery. Then the video became blurry in places, like something had been covered or blocked out. I was grateful for that because even without seeing details, the sound told me enough. A child's scream, high and raw, filled the audio. Not one scream, but repeated cries, the kind that don't come from fear alone, the kind that come from pain. I couldn't watch, I couldn't listen. My whole body reacted like it was poison. I dropped the phone and stood up too fast. Tried to reach the bathroom, but my legs didn't cooperate. I vomited right there. My dinner came up into the hallway in a horrible, bitter rush. I leaned against the wall, shaking, breathing like I had been running. Then I heard the phone again. Not a message tone. Ringing. A call. The cheap phone vibrated on the floor, buzzing like an insect trapped under glass. My stomach turned again. I didn't want to touch it. I didn't want to answer. Every part of me knew answering was a mistake. But I picked it up anyway. And this is the part that scares me the most to admit, because it didn't feel like a choice. It felt like something pushed me. Like my thumb moved before I told it to. Like my body was obeying a command that didn't come from me. I pressed answer. For a moment, there was only breathing on the line. Slow. Calm. Then a voice spoke, low and close, as if the person was standing right behind my shoulder. You still want to observe?